My name is Austin Lee, and I am one of two Capstone advisors for this, the 9th graduating class here at Clayton-Bradley Academy. 13 years ago, Clayton-Bradley opened its doors, and at that time, these students seated here in front of me were just kindergartners. 9 years ago, our very first class stood on this very stage and delivered their speeches in this same format. In fact, this is the first class to complete a full K through 12 CBA experience. 7 of those students started in that original kindergarten class. The Capstone project is part of a larger course known as Summit and is a series starting at base camp in freshman year and progressing through to Summit. Summit represents the peak, the culminating point in the journey through our school. Students set out on a year-long project to utilize every skill they have gained throughout their academic career. Effective research, creativity, public speaking, initiative, problem solving, critical thinking, and most importantly, self-directed learning. Tonight, 10 students will reach that summit, and the other 10 will go on Thursday. So as we ascend to the peak of this journey, it is just as important to enjoy the view as it is to reflect on how we got here. I want to take a moment to thank the teachers and administrators who helped this class reach the finish line. If you were a teacher on campus, there's a pretty good chance you were hounded by one or several of these seniors. They had to seek approvals, find funding, bounce ideas off countless mentors and members of the community. Special thank you to all the teachers who mentored projects and for time spent meeting with students. To Linda Cobb, who spent countless hours helping with speeches and college applications. To Dr. Jen Bruce, who provided documents, resources, curriculum ideas, parts of the speech. More importantly, she kept us on track when we felt like we were getting a little off the rails. Summit is taught by 2 teachers, myself and Mr. Scott Hussey. I want to personally thank Scott for his guidance and mentorship throughout the year. Mr. Hussey is an absolute legend of an English teacher, and I truly believe every student in America would benefit from a seat at his Harkness table. I also want to highlight that capstone projects go beyond the classroom. They are meant to make an impact outside of our walls. So in that vein, I want to thank the judges out in the back of the room who've graciously volunteered their time and expertise tonight. Some of you have interacted with these projects directly. Others are experts in their fields, and in one case, stood on this very stage and delivered their own capstone speech. Finally, to the parents and support systems, from the day you dropped them off at kindergarten to the science projects you whipped together late on a Sunday evening, wondering why you hadn't started earlier, to the hours spent on school presentations, to the hours on sports fields and in the gym, theater, music, whatever the things were that your student did, and CBA kids do a lot. The time spent listening to them vent, maybe even about their capstone project or their teachers, laughing, crying with them, being their greatest ally while also being their most ardent critic. You have helped shape them and guide them to this very moment. So thank you, parents and guardians, for getting them here. And so now, here we are, moment of truth, the summit. So without further ado, here are the capstone presentations from the class of 2026.
When I was a freshman, I walked onto a tennis court for the very first time. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I remember standing at the baseline, racket in hand, watching everyone else warm up like they'd been born holding a racket. Their serves were smooth, their footwork looked effortless, and I was just there. I was stiff, nervous, swinging at balls I had no business swinging at. I didn't know the scoring, and I didn't even know what grip to use. And for that first year, I genuinely questioned my ability on whether or not I belonged on that court at all. But something kept me coming back, and slowly over time, tennis started to make sense, not just as a sport, but as a teacher. It taught me how to focus when my mind wanted to wander, how to reset after a bad point instead of carrying it on to the next one, and how to show up even when I was tired, because discipline is not something that you feel, it's something that you do. Tennis gave me a community, a sense of confidence, and honestly, it gave me a version of myself I didn't even know existed yet. So when it came to my senior capstone, I didn't have to go looking for a topic. I'm so grateful for my capstone mentor and coach, Charles Bradley, for giving me the opportunity to be an assistant coach for the middle school tennis team. One of the ideas that Mr. Bradley and I brainstormed was doing a statistical analysis of player improvement upon my team. However, something I found more interesting and more applicable to my future was creating a tennis curriculum for beginners. Not because it was assigned, but because I remember being that freshman who was once trying to find her own pathway, and I wanted to be the one to help someone else find theirs sooner than I did. This was my response to a real problem I lived through. The problem I kept coming back to was this: beginners quit. Not because they don't love the sport, but because no one gives them a reason to stay. They come in nervous, hit a few balls, get frustrated, feel isolated, and by week 2, they're gone. There's no clear progression, no sense of I'm actually getting better, and without that, persistence is almost impossible. But my goal wasn't to create elite players. My goal was simple. I wanted beginners to feel comfortable first, to feel confident, and then by the time matches started, feel like they actually belonged on that court. I structured the curriculum around daily routines and weekly progressions. Every day had a purpose, and every week was built on from the one before it. The main thing I focused on was confidence, because a beginner who believes they belong will put in more effort than a player who doesn't believe every single time. I structured the curriculum around daily routines and weekly progressions. Every day had a purpose, and every week was built on from the one before it. The main thing I focused on was confidence, because a beginner who believes they belong will put in more effort than a player who doesn't believe every single time. But I didn't want to just feel like the curriculum was working. I wanted to know. So to measure whether the curriculum was actually doing its job, I created a simple scoring system. 5 weeks of data, 6 players, all tracked consistently so I could see real trends over time. And when I looked at the data altogether, the growth trends were undeniable. Serves went from a 1.3 average in the beginning to a 3.8. Forehands from a 2.5 to a 4.3, and backhands from a 1.8 to a 4.3. But the number isn't what I care about. But Player C's perseverance is what shaped my future. Player C's ratings were a 2 in the beginning, were for 2 for serves, 2 for forehands, and a 3 for backhands. They could make contact, but they weren't consistent. There were moments they tossed the ball, swing too early, miss completely, and just stare at the racket. But the number isn't what I care about. It's the moments that show Player C's perseverance. When they missed a shot, they shook it off in just a few seconds and went right back to the baseline. No staring, no frustration, just reset and go again. That shift from a player who froze after making mistakes to the one who bounced back from them, that is what this curriculum was actually built to create. And what I didn't realize was how much this experience changed me. I had to plan, adapt, and lead, sometimes all at the same time. I had to learn what to do when something failed, not just whenever it worked. I learned what it meant to be truly present, not just showing up, but watching how each player moves, noticing when someone was getting frustrated before they said anything, and being responsible for the energy in the space. And personally, this project marked a real shift in how I see myself. I went from being a player who followed a structure to being the person who created one. I went to end with that freshman, standing at the baseline, having no idea what she was doing. I think about her a lot. I think about what it would have meant to have had the ability to see a real pathway earlier, to see where I was, where I was going, and how I was getting there. Not because no one was guiding me, but because I wasn't ready to see it yet. The first practice I ran, I had 6 kids who looked exactly like that freshman, lost and unsure, gripping their rackets too tightly because they didn't know what else to do with the nerves. The last practice, those same 6 kids were running their own warm-ups, calling out their own mistakes before I even had the chance to, laughing whenever they missed, and then trying again. And when that final practice ended and they walked off the courts, none of them looked back like it was a place they didn't belong. They walked off like players. And I walked away knowing that the freshman who was once still finding her own pathway had just spent months helping someone else find theirs. That is what this capstone gave me. Not just a project, but proof of who I'm becoming. Because here's what I realized. This wasn't just a tennis curriculum. It was a lesson in teaching. I want to be a teacher, and what this experience showed me is that the most important thing a teacher can do is not just deliver information. It's making students feel they belong in the room. like they're capable, like the gap between where they are and where they want to be is actually crossable. That's what I tried to do on that court, and that's what I hope to do in a classroom. The skills I built here, planning lessons with intention, adapting when things don't go as planned, tracking growth, and meeting students where they are, those are not tennis skills. Those are teaching skills. And I learned them from the 6 kids who showed up nervous and left confident. And if I can do that on a tennis court at 17, I cannot wait to see what I'll build in a classroom. Thank you.
In 7th grade, I moved to Clayton-Bradley for private school in Indiana. I didn't know anyone. I was unfamiliar with East Tennessee, and I had no idea about the traditions of CBA. The very first thing I learned about was Capstone. I heard about it over and over again from my parents, teachers, and students, all of us just talking about the showcases that seniors have put on. Starting businesses, writing books, doing events, I was immediately intrigued. From that moment on, I couldn't wait to do a capstone project. I didn't know what I wanted to do, I just knew it had to be big. Not just a presentation for a completion grade, but something that mattered here at CBA. I want to leave a legacy, something at CBA that has my name on it. I'm an athlete, and athletics quickly became a home for me here at school. That summer, in 7th grade, before I was even enrolled in the school, I attended CBA basketball camp, wearing a mask and playing with a broken wrist. At that camp, I met some of the best friends that I have even to this day here at school. And since then, I have played just about every sport I possibly could for the school. Flag football, soccer, basketball, golf, and even cross country. And every single coach I had always said the exact same thing. Conditioning will win us games. Athletics change lives. They build discipline and create a brotherhood amongst the students that you wouldn't believe. It is no secret that sports at CBA matter. 65% of CBA student athletes have either played a sport or attended a camp or curriculum here at the school. Sports matter here, but there is one problem. This is our weight room. Dusty, cluttered, a dump, those are some words that CBA student athletes have used to describe its state. What should be a space for teams and coaches to safely train quickly gathered a lot of dust and became unusable. What should be a place that shows school spirit and has state-of-the-art equipment just became a dumping ground for anything not being used by the athletic department. And that's when I thought, if sports matter here so much to us students, us athletes, parents, coaches, and teachers, why doesn't our weight room reflect that? That's when I thought, this is going to be my legacy. This will be my capstone. It sounded pretty simple at first. I'm just going to remodel the weight room. If only it were that easy. Before I could begin anything, I had to get administration approval. This actually went easier than I expected because administration already wanted to do something with the weight room due to its space. So I just prepared to them a presentation with what I wanted to do, what my goals and timeline would be. After that, I began fundraising. Unfortunately, I didn't really know how to fundraise, and I was doing it wrong, so I had to go back and get even more administration approval. Through this process, I learned how to network, market, and find potential sponsors and donations that would perfectly align with what we want here at CBA. Unfortunately, I didn't really realize how much that would actually cost. I originally thought I could just go in the weight room and start deconstructing and renovating, but I didn't really know how much money I would need for that. Unfortunately, a lot of CBA students, families, and business partners had already donated a lot of money to the school earlier this year, so it was hard to raise that money. With the help of Ms. Santamissino, we quickly marketed and found potential sponsors that really made this project possible. I'm thankful to the McNeil family, who donated a large portion of money to the weight room and always supports CBA athletics, the Kirkland family in Knoxville Flooring, who free of charge donated brand new flooring and put it in themselves, as well as everyone else who made this project possible, the Odell family in Diggins Zone, the DeMarcus family, Ms. Santamissino, my capstone advisors, and everyone else who helped. I couldn't thank you guys enough, and it was only made possible because of you guys. Now for the fun part. With the help of my dad, I spent weekend after weekend, late night after late night, in the weight room, deconstructing, ripping up flooring, patching drywall, and everything else you could possibly imagine. Have you ever tried to remove a 300-pound barbell rack from the wall? Well, I had to do that twice, and then put them back in the wall. It was not fun. We spent an hour the entire day even taking this thing out of the wall. Never again. After we did that, we painted 3 of the walls a bright burgundy red and 1 of the walls black. This was actually easier than I expected, having painted walls before in the past. It was just extremely time-consuming. Having to make trip after trip to Home Depot, buying more paint than we thought we would need, taping all of the trim, and everything else like that, we ended up putting on 5 coats of that bright burgundy red. It had to be perfect. Soon after that, our school's Art Honor Society came in and painted 3 murals in the weight room. one of the Eternal Flame that's located in our upper school campus, one of a bright golden CBA crest, and 3 life skills that perfectly correlate with weightlifting. After that, Knoxville Flooring Company came in and quickly put in the new flooring and new trim, completing the perfect look for the weight room. After all that, with the money that I had raised, Coach Starkey and I are currently ordering brand new benches, weights, pile boxes, and more that'll be put in the weight room as soon as they are shipped to the school. With that being said, the new weight room is perfect and complete. What used to be a dump in a space that CBA students couldn't even use is now fully accessible for any student athlete to use and train. This wasn't just a project anymore. This is something that is permanent. In the middle of renovations, Coach Thompson came up to me and told me that he would be teaching a high school weightlifting class next year, the very first of its kind. Suddenly, this wasn't just a project that I had to do. This was a chance for me to make a space for CBA students and athletes to find a safe space to use weights and train properly. Capstone went completely not how I thought it was, but it was very unexpected. The most unexpected parts weren't all the money I had to raise, the amount of paint I had to put on the wall. It was what weightlifting did for me. Throughout senior year kind of went a little lopsided, having to apply to college applications, balance school, homework, sports, work, relationships, and everything else. I developed major anxiety, and every single thing that I was doing was completing for complete attention in my mind. With this anxiety, I started to go to the gym, our local Planet Fitness here at Maryville. That anxiety turned into therapy, and that therapy turned into a discipline that I have, and now a passion that I have for lifting weights. That's what I want my legacy to be, not just a weight room that has my name on it in the middle of our gym, but a space where other CBA students can find that same therapy and that same passion for weightlifting that I had no idea that I could find. Years ago, I had no idea what my legacy would be here at this school, but now, years later, there's a new state-of-the-art, ready-to-use functional weightlifting space for any CBA student athlete to leave. Capstone isn't just a passion product, but a chance for you to do something that is bigger than yourself. Now, there's a weight room, and its legacy will be here and remembered for years to come after I am long gone. As CBA continues to grow, our athletes will continue to grow stronger. Thank you.
Everybody has that thing they swore they were going to start using, but never did. Maybe it's that gym membership you were definitely going to start using back in January. Or maybe it's that guitar you promised yourself you'd always learn. Or maybe it's that idea sitting in your head you keep telling yourself you'll start someday. For me, it was this old pressure washer sitting in a garage collecting dust. And at the time, it didn't really seem like very much, but for my capstone, I turned this dusty old pressure washer into something that I've always wanted to start, a business. But I didn't start the business alone. Let me introduce you to one of my best friends and co-founder of the business, Grayson Graham. The business actually started when Grayson came to me with the idea of starting a business. And we didn't really think about it much. We just asked ourselves what we already had. And the answer was pretty simple, the pressure washer. And apparently that was enough for us to get started because we wasted absolutely no time getting our first job. And looking back, we probably jumped in a little bit too early because this job was very hard. The work itself was very difficult and the property was huge. And all we had was that same dusty old pressure washer. And that quickly became a problem because the job ended up taking us 2 entire days to complete. Grayson somehow shot himself in the leg with the pressure washer. And the pressure washer even broke down halfway through, causing us to have to repair it. Needless to say, we were extremely underprepared, unprofessional, and just figuring things out as we went, which is no way to run a business. But despite all that, we ended up getting the job done. But that job taught us 2 very important things. 1, how hard the work actually was and is going to be, and 2, how badly we needed to improve. So, after that disaster of first job, we decided we were going to upgrade. We wanted to work more efficiently and be more professional. So the first thing we did was we tossed aside that old pressure washer, went on Facebook Marketplace, and got ourselves a brand new pressure washing trailer rig. But unfortunately, it wasn't actually brand new, and it didn't even work when we first got it. There was a lot that had to be done. We had to replace a bunch of old broken parts so that it actually worked and was functional, and we even painted the metal and stained the wood so that it actually looked good and professional. At the same time, we also wanted to start marketing so we could get more customers in the future. First things first, we needed a name. We wanted something that made sense with the business and also was catchy, so we came up with Pressure On. Next, we went on Canva and made this logo. Then we made a website using Square, and we made some various social media accounts on different platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. We also made these hats with our logos on them that we can wear on the job. And finally, we made some business cards to hand out for networking. Now that we had some actual branding and an actual pressure washer, we decided we were ready for the next job. We were very optimistic going into our next job with our new trailer and everything, but once again, things did not go as planned. When we arrived at the job, everything looked good until we inspected our trailer and found that the water pipe connecting to the water tank was completely snapped in half. And with the time and materials we had with us, there was just no way we could fix it that day. So we had to go tell the customer what happened. And honestly, at the time, it just felt very unprofessional. But there was nothing we could do. So we had to go back, fix the trailer, and come back another day to finish the job. But when we actually finished the job, the customer was very happy. And the customer was very happy with the results and very understanding of the whole situation. And we learned that day that being professional isn't really about everything going perfect all the time, but it's about how you handle things when they go wrong. With the money from that job, we put even more back into the business. We started rebuilding and repairing the electrical system on the house that's used for chemical washing, as well as removing any old, ineffective equipment we didn't need anymore. But me and Grayson never actually have worked with electrical before, so this whole process was a lot more drawn out than I'm making it seem. Behind the scenes, there were many, many trips to Home Depot and Ace Hardware, to the point where I think the workers were getting a little suspicious. And there were many days where we worked all day and all night, and plenty of weeks where I saw Grayson more than all of my friends and family. But once we were done with all the money we could from the last job, we decided we were ready for job number 3. Job number 3 was a little bit different. This time we faced a new challenge. The house we were about to wash was made of material that could only be washed with chemical and no pressure. This is something we've seen in our research, but something we've never actually dealt with before. On top of that, we started the job right after school and during the middle of winter, giving us only about 2.5 hours of daylight to complete the job. You could say the pressure was on. But we faced the challenge and got to work. And to our surprise, everything actually went very smooth. We finished the job with time to spare, the customer was happy, and we even took the opportunity to get some pictures and videos for our social media accounts. And that job marked the first job where everything went smooth and nothing went wrong. That old pressure washer used to sit in the garage and collect dust, but now it represents something much bigger. That someday only happens when you decide to start. I mean, look at our first job. It showed us how underprepared we were. And then our second job, our pressure washer broke, and we had to take accountability. But our third job showed us how much we had grown. Each job brought us new challenges, real-world experience, and growth. But our growth didn't come from us just sitting around waiting for something to happen. It came from us taking that first step. And the difference between something collecting dust and something that changes you is taking action. Thank you.
Most of us don't realize we're living inside someone else's sacrifice. We wake up, go to school, chase our goals, complain about our problems, rarely stopping to think about who made it all possible. For me, that person is my mom. My mom is a flower farmer. Some have said that my mom is audacious. Some have said that I'm audacious too. Around 5 years ago, my mom, with little experience, decided to sell everything and buy a 68-acre property in Greenback and start flower farming as well as the business on it. That business is called Southern Bella Blooms. For her business, she'd always tease at the idea of having a documentary about her story and visualizations about what it was like to be a flower farmer. So, when it came time to pick a capstone, the idea was already there. I just needed to make it into a reality. And it wouldn't just be about her, but her biggest passion, flowers. When I was younger, I had a dream. And like any other high-hoping kid, that dream was to become a cool and influencing content creator who gets to make videos and money from it. And then, of course, there's the part where I would eventually move into a house with all my friends someday. Inevitably, that dream changed, but parts of it stayed. I loved the idea of filming and editing, but I never took the time to learn or teach myself. So when it came time to start working on this capstone project, I didn't know how to film, I didn't know how to edit, and I didn't even know how to record a proper voiceover. I had zero experience. What I did have, though, is a story worth telling and the determination to tell it right. So, when I first started working on this project, it went from something small to something big quicker than I expected. At first, I told myself, how hard could it be? But those naive words were what put me into a false sense of ease. That sense of ease was dangerous. It led to procrastination and a whole lot of sitting back. As soon as I actually started working on this project, I had realized something. I'm no prodigy, and it truly showed. I had to record voiceovers, make audio clips, and do all the filming, all of which didn't really work out. The audio didn't really sync, and the footage wasn't really that well kept. So, eventually, I decided that I was going to need to take a bigger step forward. So I did. Originally, I had used a camera right here from CBA's new media class to film portions of this documentary. But I quickly realized something. This camera was not as easy to use as I thought, and I ran into a brick wall of sorts. If I kept pouring all of my time and effort into trying to learn how to use this camera, it probably wouldn't end well for me, and I figured I'd run out of time. So I had to come up with a solution, and that I did. I realized that my mom's phone camera has amazing quality. And not only that, but like every mom does, she already had thousands of videos and pictures of our farm, family, and flowers growing on it. So, with this newfound method of gathering pictures and videos and a little bit of determination, eventually the audio started to match the edit cuts, the footage looked tight and well equipped, and I was gaining confidence with every step forward and being audacious. Now, as far as the voiceovers of the video goes, I had my mom sit down and just quite simply look over the footage of the documentary. She didn't need a script. She didn't need any of that stuff. Everything she said came from her pure passion and experience for what she loved, which I wholeheartedly admired. So now, I can say that I have a documentary that I'm proud of and that I can show the world. And right now, what I'm about to show you is 30 seconds of that documentary, my work and my mom's passion.
One of the questions I get asked the most is, what do you do in the winter? Well, winter on a flower farm isn't quite what people imagine. It's not all stillness and silence. This is when seeds are started, when plants begin forming long before anyone can see them. It's when the work moves indoors. The days may not be as sweaty as summer, but they are full in a different way.
What you just saw was 30 seconds from the beginning of the winter portion of the documentary. Arguably my favorite of the 4 seasons shown in the film and the most well put together. Throughout the making of this film, I've had the opportunity to learn a lot about myself while also learning a lot about something I'm interested in. I've learned to be more confident in my ability to persevere, as well as my ability to try something new, learn it, and conquer it. Though I've also learned some other things. I'm not perfect. I can't make a documentary or a masterpiece on a whim without having any past experience, and I learned to be a lot less naive while doing so. So, within the core of all that, I've been able to do all of these things and learn all of it while being able to honor someone who's carried my weight on their shoulders from the time I was born. And to me, that's more important to myself than learning any new fun skill will ever be. Pretty audacious, right? I now have an 11-minute, 30-second documentary in the can. Thank you.
Whether you're a student, faculty, or parent at Clayton-Bradley Academy, we are all connected through cottages. I've been a part of this school for a very long time, and I don't just mean the very first day of kindergarten. I've actually been here since the groundbreaking back in February 2013 at the Clayton Homes Auditorium. That is me on the right, shoveling dirt, but if you really couldn't tell, there's a giant red arrow pointing at me. Now, here's the thing. Where you are standing right now, there used to be nothing, just dirt. No buildings, no nothing. However, Clayton Homes had built the school in just 5 months. Clayton-Bradley is rooted in Clayton Homes and Pat Bradley, who's the visionary for the school who believes that all students should love to learn and find their passion. I have done just that. I have found my passion in architecture. Since it started in cottages, why not make 2 of my own? But how did I get here? During my junior year, I took ACE, which stands for Architecture, Construction, and Engineering, or for some of you who may know, Design with the Pros. Now, for Design with the Pros, I use tools like Chief Architect to create interior designs, but I also wanted to use architecture to solve problems. There was a problem. The problem was that we used to have this place called the Trailhead, which is a place for high schoolers to go to, eat lunch, talk and convene, and study. However, it was replaced with a classroom. And so my team for ACE, or for CERT, which stands for Construction Engineering, or Construction Industry Roundtable, it consists of me, 6 other students, and our mentor, John Mashburn. And for this, we decided to create a new social space that was like the Trailhead with added benefits. And so this is the social cottage. The social cottage takes things that were already there for the Trailhead, like, where people can go and, talk, convene, eat lunch, et cetera, like I said before. However, it also adds extra benefits, for example, like a basketball area, pool table, and, a place for, other games. And then there's also a conference room for people to go into and, have lunch as well, but it's also for a place for, clubs like DECA, Model UN, and Key Club to have meetings, for example, like officers' meetings. But that was the issue. It had been 1 year since I had used Chief Architect and had to remind myself how to use it, even though I already knew how to use it for like interior designs. I had to teach myself exterior designs, landscaping, materials, and objects to create something like this. And Chief Architect is a very odd software as it is hard to do things. For example, it is easy to use the software for interior designs and exterior designs. However, it's extremely hard to put a roof on the building as it took me a half an hour. Even despite this, we had created that design, and we wanted to move forward. But the issue was our mentor, John Mashburn, had asked us to create another cottage that would be double the size, that would be focused on athletics, called, you guessed it, the Athletic Cottage. And so, mind you, this was 2 weeks before we had to go and present in front of a board of Clayton Homes employees who were architects, landscape architects, and some of them were CERT judges. So we came up with the design, and this is what it is. This is the Athletic Cottage, which is a place for students to go and be physically active while being within our learning environment. And so students and athletes can share the space to, stay physically active, while also having other places as well as, a locker room, storage room, and a conference room. Again, so this space is for, athletes to go and have, a space for like film review or to talk during or before, games or other things like that. But that was the thing. The day that we had to go and present, I was in my presentation attire, actually the suit that I'm wearing right now. It started to rain, and I got drenched. And so for that, it actually had affected our score, as one of the judges said to be more enthusiastic while putting a smiley face next to our disappointing score. Even though this had happened, we got overwhelmingly positive feedback, and out of the 108 points that we could have achieved, we got 94. I really couldn't have made this project possible without any of my teammates or our mentors, along with people like Michelle Graves, who's a Clayton Homes employee, who took our renderings from Chief Architect and made things like this, for example, that both showed the Athletic Cottage and the Social Cottage. And not only did they make this project possible, they also helped the little kid who was shoveling dirt 13 years ago find his passion for architecture. Thank you.
It was November 2013, my kindergarten year at the Knoxville Jewish Day School, and I had definitely taken what my mom referred to as my crazy pill that day. I was loudly climbing a bookshelf while my teacher was trying to safely retrieve me. That year, I had begun the school's Hebrew curriculum, and unfortunately for everyone, the Hebrew word for stop is die. I was yelling down at my teacher, "Die! Die!" intending to communicate stop. However, this was the one teacher in the school that didn't understand Hebrew. Let's just say chaos ensued. Some children are remembered as the quiet ones, the rule followers, or the teacher's pets. I was remembered for being loud and having boundless energy. My teachers didn't quite know what to do with me, and to be honest, neither did I. Luckily, that led me to meeting one of the most incredible human beings, my occupational therapist, Miss Kathy. Miss Kathy was more than an OT to me. She was a teacher who could look past my hyperactivity to teach me how to be productive. That meant the world to a little girl who had never been seen as anything other than the problem child. By the time middle school began, I was thriving. I had learned how to manage my emotions, pay attention, and connect with people. I thrived in social environments no longer defined by my challenges, but instead my kindness and attentiveness. By the time high school began, I was determined to become an occupational therapist. I wanted to dedicate my life to a career that had given so much to me, to be someone who could see the potential in every child. Taking these experiences into consideration many years later, I decided that for my capstone, I would bridge the gap of not having a dedicated sensory space and create sensory toolkits. Sensory toolkits are a culmination of tools that appeal to all areas of both sensory seekers and sensory avoiders. However, I decided I would make them for the two schools that gave so much to me, the CBA Preschool and the Arnstein Jewish Community Center Preschool, or the AJCC. However, in order to make this project genuinely beneficial for the kids, I had to meet with two occupational therapists to determine the needs of the two schools. For example, a child that is a sensory avoider may need noise-canceling headphones to prevent overstimulation of the ears. Another example could be a child that is a sensory seeker. This child may chew their shirt to gain sensory input of the mouth. This child may need teething toys to help prevent them from chewing their shirt. From here, my next steps were gaining the money to put this project into motion. First, I had to learn how to write a grant. This took the longest out of anything to learn. Luckily, I had resources like Miss Ann Santomassino, the Director of Development here at CBA, and a direct link within my community leading me to the funder of the grant I was applying to. This way, I could not only learn tips and tricks to learning how to write grants, but I could also gain direct information on what it is the grant writer wanted to see in the application she was receiving. However, remember when I said I wanted to make boxes for not only CBA, but also the AJCC? Well, this is where I encountered some challenges. A lack of funding from CBA and several other hoops to jump through made me lose time and patience. So eventually, in the end, I decided it would be best to scrap the idea of making boxes for CBA and just stick to the AJCC. From here, my next steps were creating and assembling the sensory toolkits. I began by coordinating with the curriculum developer at the AJCC to see how to go about buying materials and making sure everything was still going according to plan. After that, it was time to actually assemble. I spent countless workshops in Mr. Hussey's room, creating sensory toolkits, making sure there were no choking hazards in the baby boxes, and all the preschool boxes were age appropriate as well. After that, now that we're all caught up, my next steps haven't quite taken place yet. This will consist of creating an instructional flyer to make sure the teachers know what's in their boxes and how to use it. This way, if a new teacher comes in, the box won't be moved to the back of the class because the new teacher didn't know how to use it. Finally, I will deliver the boxes and see the looks on the teachers' faces when they see their new classroom tools. Through this project, I learned that meaningful change requires patience, resilience, and flexibility. What began as a mission rooted in my early childhood became a lesson. I learned how to seek guidance, accept setbacks, and shift when plans changed. And most importantly, I learned that turning problems into action can help children in the way I very once needed. Thank you.
Have you ever watched a video of yourself and immediately wanted to turn it off? Now, imagine you watching that video with your team, and every mistake is paused, noted right on that moment. That is what basketball film is like. I played basketball for most of my life, and growing up, I would get so anxious before every game, every practice, and anything basketball related. My anxiety was so bad that I didn't even try out for the middle school team in 6th grade because I was too focused on what other people thought of me or that I wasn't good enough to play, and I let anxiety dictate my decisions. Luckily, that all changed when I came to CBA. I built up my confidence, and I tried out for the team again in my 8th grade year, and well, I would say it went pretty well. We actually ended up being the first team to ever win a championship for basketball at CBA, and I had a lot of fun. Now, in middle school, we didn't have any film, so in high school, where that was a normal thing, naturally, my anxiety started to increase. And in basketball film, you're thrown into viewing basketball in a way you might have never seen it before, and this can be hard to comprehend, especially when you're just a freshman. So, for my senior capstone project, I wanted to find a way to help younger players understand basketball film I wanted to find a way to help younger players understand basketball film, and that's why I decided to coach middle school basketball film sessions to give middle schoolers a familiar face and someone who's been in their shoes before. Once I came up with this idea, I walked down to the lower school and met with our middle school basketball coach, Coach Thompson, and I told him about my idea. And well, he loved it. And luckily enough, he was already thinking about adding middle school film sessions, so I was good to go. Before their season started, I wanted to improve my basketball IQ. Not just as a basketball player, but also so when I'm teaching the players, I really know what I'm talking about. I started by watching as much basketball as I could, mainly March Madness games, since I figured that's when some of the best true basketball was played. And I would watch these games not just as a fan, but I would watch them as a coach, analyzing the plays and seeing if a good or a bad idea was made. Once the actual season started, my first task was going over one of the scrimmages the team had. So I opened my laptop and I clicked play. And well, I quickly realized that college basketball and middle school basketball are much different. In middle school, some kids are my size, some are bigger somehow, and some are much smaller, and all their skills vary. But once I was done finishing the film, I wrote down a lot of notes. 2 pages of notes going over only 4 minutes of gameplay. And I had to take a step back and realize that these kids aren't the Duke Blue Devils or the Tennessee Vols. They're a whole bunch of 12-year-olds. After I was done with the film, I gave myself 3 key points to go over with the team. And while going over those 3 key points with the team, I noticed something in the back. The coaches were cracking up over something I had said. And at first, I was confused. I thought maybe I said the wrong thing, but I continued the film, and once I was done, I went up to the coaches, and they told me how well of a job I did. And that made me happy, but I wanted to know, what were you guys laughing about? And the 3 key points I shared with the team were the exact same 3 key points they had been harping on their team the whole year. And this is exactly what I wanted. I wanted the players to be able to look up to me, not just as a high schooler or a high school basketball player, but as another one of their coaches. And it's important that I share the same basketball philosophy with my coaches, so that I teach the players the way that they want me to teach. I would continue doing basketball film with the team till the end of their season, going every Friday and some Wednesdays. And although the main goal of film was to improve at basketball, we still had fun. And we had laugh at the funny moments, like when one of the players would do a silly celebration after every single point he scored. Or if someone hit a crazy shot, I would rewind that and we would live that moment and celebrate it. I wanted to make the film a safe space where we can give constructive feedback, laugh it off, and move on. And not only was film fun, it was also successful. The team showed so much improvement throughout the whole year, ending their season winning the last 4 out of 5 games, and I couldn't be more proud of them. This project became more than just basketball film sessions. When I was younger, I let my anxiety dictate my decisions. I didn't try out for the middle school team in 6th grade, and I would get nervous before every game, every practice, and anything basketball related. But now, I can stand in front of players, coaches, and a crowd and be confident in myself. Film is something I used to fear, and now it's something I can teach. And if even one of those middle school players are a little more confident when they walk into their first high school film session, then I accomplished my goal. Basketball will always be a game of mistakes, but it's also a game of learning, and has shaped me into the person I am today. Thank you.
Nine weeks before I was supposed to stand on this stage, I realized that my senior capstone experience was no longer about being the founder of a club, but instead, it was about whether I'd actually learned how to lead one. When our community needed an ACE club chapter here at CBA, ACE standing for Architecture, Construction, and Engineering, I was tasked with the creation. And at first, the idea felt pretty simple and straightforward. There wasn't an ACE class beyond designing with the pros, and there wasn't really a structured continuation for students interested in those fields. I wanted to change that. I wanted students to have a space where their interests didn't end with just a one-semester class, and where they could connect directly with industry professionals from Clayton Homes and ACE. At the beginning, it felt like the vision was going to be enough to complete this project. Mrs. Howell agreed to sponsor the club, 13 other students signed up, industry professionals expressed interest, interviews with large companies and field studies were scheduled. Momentum started to form, and that was exciting to me. What I hadn't fully understood yet was the position that I had placed myself in. Very quickly, I found myself operating between two main groups. On one side, I had professionals from Clayton Homes, administrators from Clayton-Bradley, and mentors from ACE, who all had different standards and expectations that I was learning in real time. On the other side, I had student members who joined because they believed that this club would provide them opportunity and direction for the pursuit of their careers. I was responsible to both. I had to communicate upwards with professionalism and downwards with clarity, although I didn't have full control over the expectations coming from above, nor the motivation and execution coming from below. That is when I began to recognize a form of leadership that's often overlooked. It's not leadership from the top, where authority is clearly defined, nor is it leadership from the bottom, where others constantly rely on direction. It's leadership in the middle, to the level where you have just enough responsibility to earn both credit and blame, but not enough power to make everything happen the way that you'd like. The introduction of the National CERT competition as a project for ACE Club members became the perfect opportunity for me to lead that change. CERT requires members to design and present two 24 by 36-inch boards that address a real construction challenge. My group's boards were focused on addressing the affordable housing shortage by designing a 5-story modular apartment complex in Morgan County, Tennessee that utilized modular building techniques, innovative construction designs, and factory-built efficiency. Unlike the early stages of building a club, this competition required structure. I introduced firm deadlines, measurable expectations, and a shared outcome that required accountability from every single member. Instead of loosely leading an idea, I was now directing a team towards a tangible outcome. I was also given a new mentor for this phase of the project, Rick Boyd, the former Chief Operating Officer, or COO, of Clayton Homes, whose leadership style modeled consistency and structure. Under this new guidance, I began approaching meetings differently. Instead of taking on everything myself, I began to delegate roles. I introduced firm deadlines, and I trusted members to take accountability over specific sections of the board. The change in structure was noticeable in the way that we worked. Members became more confident in their designs, industry mentors engaged with us more strategically, and our project work time became more focused and collaborative. Recently, 2 other group members and I presented our CERT boards to 8 judges from Clayton Homes and ACE. Standing in front of industry professionals and explaining our decisions required a level of preparation, coordination, and quick thinking that I didn't have in myself at the beginning of this project. The questions were targeted to strengthen our weaknesses, the expectations were high, and after the presentation concluded, for the first time, I felt like I had led the club to a success. Throughout this process, I've learned that leadership isn't about control. It's about coordination. It's about turning expectations into direction and uncertainty into structure. It requires accountability even when authority is limited. As someone who's learned to lead from the middle, I want to take a moment to recognize the people who have made this project possible for me. I want to thank my mentors from Clayton-Bradley Academy, Mrs. Howell, Mr. Lee, and Mr. Hussey, the professionals from Clayton Homes, Rick Boyd, John Mashburn, and Gavin Mabe, and our CERT mentor, or ACE mentor, Brianna Williams. At the beginning of this capstone, I thought that success would mean proving that I could create something. Now, I understand that success means proving that I can sustain what I have created. At the beginning of this project, ACE began as an idea to bridge a gap. What it has been and what it will continue to become is a program that connects students to industry mentorships, competitions, and opportunities long after my graduation. If you'd like to see the project that shaped and challenged me throughout this process, my group CERT boards are on display in the back of the room. I set out to found a club. What I've learned is how to lead one from the middle. And that lesson will stick with me far beyond this stage. Thank you.
Have you ever reached a moment where you knew a decision could change everything? The plan you had, the path you were on, or the person you were becoming? If your answer is yes, then you have something in common with former UT basketball star and current LA Laker Dalton Knecht, as well as over 2,000 other men's Division I players this past offseason. That's nearly 40% of the entire league, and what connects them is that they all made the same choice. They entered the transfer portal. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what that means, you're not alone. When I first heard about it back in middle school, I imagined it as something out of what I thought fantasy basketball looked like. a glowing portal where players walked in wearing one jersey and stepped out wearing another. In reality, it's a digital database created in 2018 that allows athletes to declare their intent to transfer and be recruited by other programs. Every player steps into the unknown, betting that the right environment will give them the opportunity to succeed. Whether celebrated or criticized, the transfer portal's influence on modern-day collegiate sports cannot be ignored. It gives coaches their own pivotal decisions to make to produce program success. And to look for guidance, they all looked at one place, data. And that is where my capstone process truly began. So let's take to the court and start the game. First half, tip-off. This project really began back in 8th grade, when the middle school basketball team was short on players and coaches went around asking anyone if they wanted to join. I was never really a standout, as you can probably tell here, but I slowly became a student of the game, obsessing over wanting to learn everything there is to know. That momentum stalled when an injury before my sophomore season sidelined me both physically and mentally. After 2 seasons of recovery attempts, I learned I had a labral tear in my hip that required surgery, effectively ending my time playing. Even then, my passion for basketball never disappeared, and in turn, I gained an interest in statistics. By my junior year, I began an internship at Clayton-Holmes. There, I shadowed the Data Engineering, Analytics, and Governance Department. My internship happened to fall during March Madness, when employees participate in the Berkshire Brackets competition, with a chance to win $1 million per year for life. With those kind of stakes, every bracket choice became an analytics problem, using data to best predict winners. By the Ready Basketball dashboards, I pitched an idea for my capstone project, Blazer Ball, a sports-wide program for stats, game recaps, and athlete profiles. But the scope was bigger than one student could realistically build, especially with real-time data collection and fully fledged user interface. So I pivoted to a new game plan, a sports media analytics and journalism club called GAME, or Growth and Athletic Marketing Enterprise. Both projects aimed to grow with the ever-changing sports ecosystem. In 2021, NIL, or name, image, and likeness, began to allow college athletes to profit off of their skills and personal brand. GAME was meant to reflect that shift locally, giving student athletes more visibility and ownership of their stories. But historically, clubs built around capstone projects are difficult to support and sustain. So I realized I had to pivot, and it was back to the drawing board once again. By the time I reached what felt like halftime, I was staring at a large deficit with no real plan for a comeback. Despite the distance ahead, I knew I needed to take it a step back and realize and look at this project differently. What felt like failures was more like a scouting report on myself, not always ones you want to read, but ones that tell the truth about your strengths and weaknesses. My struggles weren't because my ideas were bad. My struggles were because they weren't built around the skills that define me. Every player has a system, a way that they see the floor that tells them how to play. For me, that system has always been analysis. Once I understood that, I knew I was ready to take my first step through the transfer portal. The clock was starting on the second half, rebound. My objective was to observe how reliance on the transfer portal compared to roster continuity influenced team success across the 2022-2025 seasons. These findings are used to help coaches decide where their time and money should be spent when building rosters. Traditional recruiting invests years in high school players, hoping that they become impact players. The transfer portal, on the other hand, invests in athletes who have already proven themselves at the college level. As the latter approach has grown, so have the financial stakes. In the 2025 season, the largest reported NIL budget belonged to the Michigan Wolverines at nearly $9 million. The next year, that number skyrocketed to over $22 million for the Kentucky Wildcats, a $13 million increase in a single offseason. Using team and season data, I calculated net transfer value, or transfers in minus transfers out, and compared that to Ken Palm's continuity metric, or percentage of minutes by returning players. Using regression analysis, I saw how these metrics related to win percentage through a weak to moderate positive correlation, seeing as transfers increased, so did a slight increase in win percentage. This pattern was also nearly identical when I switched the connection to be about continuity, a direct relationship. To understand the strength of these relationships, I performed continuity correlation tests. These resulted in incredibly small p-values, meaning that these relationships were statistically significant and not produced by random chance. After splitting up these teams' transfer usage into 3 categories, high, moderate, and low categories, which you will see visually in a second, I was able to compare the impact of these extremes on win percentage. As you can see here, teams with a high continuity strategy produced slightly higher win improvement than teams with high transfer strategy. Finally, to compare how these 2 strategies interacted with each other, I created an interaction plot. As you can see here, teams who utilize high transfer strategy but also had high continuity strategy produced the best results. My recommendation to coaches is a hybrid roster strategy where they focus on strategic transfers to improve weaknesses while also maintaining a stable core of returning players. An example of this is UT's 2023 roster reconstruction, where they brought in transfers like Dalton Connect and Jordan Gainey, as well as bringing back core players such as Akai Ziegler and Santiago Vescovi. Now that you've seen these insights, how did I build the analysis that got me here? Well, it's time for us to take a time out and review my data analytics journey. I committed myself to learning R, the industry standard for data analysis and visualization. Despite its simple name, their learning curve was very steep, with packages and commands that initially seemed like a foreign language. After completing multiple online courses, I finally had enough confidence to begin preparing my data. That confidence quickly disappeared once I moved from these simple data sets onto real-world examples. To build my data set, I drew from sources like Ken Palm, Sports Reference, Evan Meyer, and Bartrovic, which each gave different insights into college basketball performance and transfer portal activity. However, the real challenge wasn't finding these data sources, it was cleaning them, since data scientists estimate that 70 to 80% of the analysis time is spent purely on cleaning, and I quickly understood why. After going through some of these instances in the data sets, I found issues like abbreviations, acronyms, and parentheses, which all needed to be corrected so I could merge these into a singular collective data set. To do this, I created lookup tables, which allowed me to centralize and standardize all of the information that I was looking for. After hundreds of tables, thousands of lines of code, and countless hours, I finally had a working data set. As the clock resets for overtime, every game asks the same question. How do you approach the next possession when the first plan wasn't enough? For teams today, that's not just a metaphor, that's real decisions. As transfer usage is continually on the rise and continuity is in decline, learning about these insights will only become more valuable for teams. For me, the confidence gained through these setbacks, learning to reset and adjust when momentum shifts is what I'll take with me into college and a potential career in analytics. And what I want you to take away from my story is this. You don't have to know the final score to take the next shot. Thousands of players jump into a portal every year without knowing exactly where they'll land, but they take that jump anyway. So the next time you're at a turning point, remember, the only way to find the environment where you thrive is to take that first step. Thank you.
I've never had to look far for a role model. Raised in a house full of women, including 2 sisters who are 10 and 20 years older than me, confidence wasn't something that I had to find. It was handed to me. And not every girl gets this opportunity. I first began to notice this when I got the honor to be the middle school cheer coach for our school's cheer team. There are tons of girls on this team, and yet so many of them lacked this natural confidence, which I just assumed was instilled in every young girl's mind. This is why I created the Women in Leadership panel. This panel was a way to bring in strong female leaders from around the Blount County and Knoxville area to come and talk to the high school girls here at CBA about their raw experiences being a woman in leadership and how that has helped them to have confidence not only in their careers, but in themselves. In order to execute this panel, I had to first secure a location to host it, find a date that maximized people's availability, go on a hunt for contacts, and then email said contacts about being in my panel, and finally, once all that was settled, create an advertisement to attract a large audience. To my overly eager self, I thought, easy enough, and quickly sprung into action. However, anyone who knows me is aware that I am the epitome of a hot mess. So naturally, my capstone was just as unorganized, if not a little bit more. I have always known that I am a huge talker. I talk so much that sometimes my dad likes to refer to me as the mouth of the South. However, things went a little bit differently when it became time for me to talk to people about being in my panel. One of my first contacts, Dr. Kreger, has kids here at CBA, and she participated in our school's beloved Pistol Creek Day. I remember that morning, I was getting out of the creek when Mr. Lee came up to me, and he told me, "Okay, Jordan, one of your contacts is here. This is the perfect time for you to get your first panelist so you can get your capstone on the roll." I just stared at him like he was crazy, trying to wrap my mind around different ideas on how I could excuse myself from having to do this. "Oh, Mr. Lee, it's about to start pouring rain. I can't talk to her. I'm covered in creek water, and I definitely smell like algae. That's just not professional." However, he was very persistent and proceeded to try and invite her over. When he did this, I took my opportunity and I ran away. I didn't just run away from him then. I ran away from him the whole rest of the day anytime he tried to talk to me. Not because I was nervous, not because I was shy, but because I was just embarrassed. I couldn't comprehend how someone like me, a girl who could talk to a brick wall if I had to, was scared to talk to one person about my capstone. As a result, I had to give myself a pep talk. "Okay, Jordan, you need to get out of this shell you've encapsulated yourself in and start reaching out to people about your panel, or you won't have anything to present." However, there was a slight issue with this. All of my information for my capstone was written on a master document in hot pink writing. This included the emails I prepared to send out to all of my contacts. I always asked Mr. Hussey and Mr. Lee to look over these emails and give me advice on how to make them more professional. Their biggest tip of advice: don't send them in hot pink. So what did I do? Naturally, I didn't listen, and I sent my emails out hot pink title and all. Luckily, I believe the women I reached out to loved this little extra flair, and they agreed to partake. So now it was time to advertise. Truly, I can't think of a better way to advertise something around the CBA campus other than with posters. So to Canva, I went to create the perfect advertisement. I found this line art image of a woman holding what I thought at the time was a coffee cup. I'm not too sure if I had my glasses on when I picked this, though, because this drink definitely had a different kind of buzz. This is definitely not a coffee cup. This is a wine glass. So I needed to find a way to fix this. Obviously, I went to every high schooler's best friend, ChatGPT. But we all learn at some point, ChatGPT is not the most reliable way to fix something. So after 2 hours of waiting for it to regenerate my poster, I was thoroughly surprised to open my laptop to this. Because truly, what screams woman in leadership more than black lipstick, a tattoo sleeve, and yes, the wine glass I asked to take out, front and center this time. Despite these chaotic moments, my panel executed so much better than I could have ever imagined. 5 women stood in front of a classroom filled with eager young women, hoping to gather pearls of wisdom about how to grow their own confidence. I remember being so excited when girls that were at the panel would come up to me and tell me how they loved it and couldn't wait for the next one. A couple of them even asked for my panelists' contact information because they inspired them to look into career fields they'd never thought about before. Not only did these women do that, but they also helped me. They helped me to discover that my capstone wasn't just a way to instill confidence in my fellow teenage girls, but a way to help me regrow my confidence in myself. It is because of what they had to say that I'm able to stand up here in front of all of you with full confidence in what I'm saying. In fact, I'd like to be able to give you guys some of the advice they gave me and the other girls. There were so many gems of wisdom, but here are some of my favorites. What is essential for leadership? Preparation. Lead yourself before you lead others. How can you present your most confident self? Do what you love. Following your heart is always the pathway to confidence. What can you do when others make you feel like you don't belong? Trust yourself and your abilities. Claim the strengths that you know you have. How can you handle the pressures of feeling unique towards other people? Focus on having fun. You really can't exude confidence without having a little bit of fun first. And finally, how can I share my confidence with others? Be confident and tell your story about how you even grew your confidence. For me personally, I sent hot pink emails to female leaders across Tennessee, yet I'm still confident enough to stand up here and tell you all about it. So I'll leave you with a question that Demi Lovato once asked. What's wrong with being confident? From where I'm standing, not a thing. Thank you.
Someone once told me that the key to happiness is to lower my expectations. Undersell and overdeliver. And if I were to do that, people wouldn't have any resentments, right? If I lower my expectations, how could I get mad if things weren't met? I'm here tonight to talk about what happens when we higher our expectations. Thank you, good evening, and welcome. My name is Scott Hussey. I am one of the 3 instructors of this Capstone class for 2026, along with my colleagues Austin Lee and Linda Cobb. Yes, both, definitely. To the parents, grandparents, siblings, boyfriends, girlfriends, to the alumni that are here, right? To the faculty, present and former faculty of the students that are going to be on stage, to the administration, to the sound crew, to the class of 2027, and most importantly, to the class of 2026. Welcome to this evening's second night of Capstone presentations. I'm very excited that you are here. All right. Before our presenters get on, I'm going to tell you 2 stories. Both are kind of confessional in nature, and they'll get to my point about expectations. When I was in your shoes as a senior of high school, I kept a different scorecard for my senior year than my father did. My scorecard was social, and I did really well my senior year according to my scorecard. According to my father's scorecard, I wasn't doing so well. And when we went to discuss my college plans, we didn't quite agree. My plan of going to Florida Atlantic University and surfing most days did not exactly align with his plan for me. Since he held the college fund, we made a deal where I agreed to his plan. Again, because we kept a different scorecard, his plan also kind of included me going to the University of Florida, not out of desire, but out of punishment. I might be the only person that you know that was been a Gator by punishment alone. See, my older brother had just finished boot camp and was part of the ROTC program. And me going up to the University of Florida meant I can check in with my older brother. My dad added another stipulation, and I, of course, agreed, that I would come home every weekend and work on a kitchen line from Friday night to Sunday afternoon, getting about 25 hours or so during the course of that weekend. I'm grateful that my father held me to higher expectations than I held myself to. When I was a senior, I didn't have anyone, I didn't like this class. I had my father, and that was it. These students are so lucky because they have you all, this community. I'm going to tell you another story about higher expectations. And this is another confessional, and it takes place not in my past, but in everyone here's recent past. Back in January, Mr. Lee and I were very concerned. We asked for a delay. We asked to see if we could move Capstone night this evening to after spring break. I'm telling you, this is confessional, Zoe, right? I'm serious. So we had our rationale. Our reasons were sound. We presented it to the administration. The administration was open. They listened to us, and they said, we respect your decision, and they were gracious enough to allow us to decide what to do. I then brought it to our Harkness table, lunched with my colleagues. Again, I presented our rationale. It was sound, and this time it was met with some critical thinking. My colleagues held us to a higher standard. They said there's precedent. 8 senior classes before this one have presented on this evening. And we are going to hold this class and you, Mr. Hussey, even though your excuses are great, your reasons are great, we want to hold you to a higher standard and hold our students to a higher standard. And that's one of the reasons I love working at Clayton-Bradley. Everyone agrees that going to the higher standard is the way to go. In an unprincipled world, to be principled yourself is a solution. If I cannot control outside, I can control inside. So I'm going to tell you one more thing about holding to a higher standard. Our students who have appeared on this stage on Tuesday night and are going to appear on this stage tonight have met our standard for their project. Now they have to have a public presentation. But why? Why a public presentation? Why this? This is the very challenging part of this evening. This is why we have so many alumni members here, so many family members here, so many faculty, current and present here. This evening is about sharing that idea. When project-based learning was first coming out and we were designing this school, one of the key factors of project-based learning is a public presentation. It makes students accountable for their learning. One of the key principles of Clayton-Bradley Academy is whoever is doing the speaking is doing the learning. And so our students are going to come up and they're going to share their capstone experience with you. It's going to be an amazing thing. And I'm going to tell you one more final thought before I let our first speaker come on. I am so incredibly proud of these students. One of the things I've been told is you do not judge a teacher by their own words, but you judge a teacher by the quality of their students. And so while we do have the judges, and I did forget to welcome you. Welcome, judges. Well, yes, thank you. Everyone, please welcome our first speaker for tonight's capstone presentations. Thank you.
Leaving Walland, Tennessee is not generally a difficult thing to do. As this is where I live, I'm used to the occasional group of cyclists or maybe even a bear sighting. But in general, nothing happens in Walland. This is clearly what I was accustomed to as I left my house the night before my first event, expecting to be back in 15 minutes, and absolutely not anticipating the vice president heading into Walland, and myself not returning for another 2.5 hours. Before I get into that situation, you need to know why this was such a big deal. Baking has always been my safe place. Although some people might say that it is stressful because of its precise and delicate nature, that is exactly why I love it. Structure has guided my life since I was a kid. Because of this, baking fits me perfectly. When I'm reading the clear instructions of a recipe, my mind also clears and allows me to focus on the task at hand. With this love and a lot of practice, I became the baker of my household. I started making cakes for my papa's birthday and embodied a real baker as I crafted and fulfilled the request of blueberry muffins from my little brother and his friends. I never would have thought that I would be capable of making a business out of this, but when capstone brainstorming began junior year, inspiration struck. When I thought of starting my home bakery business, I loved the idea, but I was worried about bringing in baking, something I hold so close to my heart. I realized early on that this project would give me the unique opportunity to take baking, which is something I know a lot about, and apply it to something I know less about, the world of business. I didn't find this opportunity in any of my other ideas, which is why I chose to start my baking business. The first months of this process consisted of planning, and, some more planning. I quickly realized that running this business involved far more than just baking. The name of my business was one of the last decisions I made in the planning process. I eventually decided on Oven Light Bakery, due to my habit of staying up late into the night baking. This was a combination of suggestions given to me by my family, friends, and teachers. At first, I was overwhelmed by the amount of suggestions I had from the people around me. I was holding on to this false idea that the project belonged to just me, and if I involved anyone else, I would be doing it incorrectly. I overcame this difficulty by really hearing out people's suggestions, which is the first example of my main takeaway from this process. Knowing when to ask for help makes you stronger, not weaker. Sometimes that lesson is internal, and sometimes it's forced on you, which brings me back to the vice president visiting Walland. My first market was on a Saturday. I had everything laid out. My menu was planned, I had blocked off Thursday evening and Friday to prepare, and I thought I had thought of everything. On the evening before the market, I was doing a friend a favor and taking over their pet sitting for the night. Before I walked out the door, I preheated the oven and sat most of my prepared dough out to thaw. Now, apparently, I was the only one in all of East Tennessee who didn't realize that Vice President J.D. Vance was visiting Blackberry Farm that weekend. As I drove down Highway 321, I was stopped by a police officer directing traffic. He waved me forward, so I went, and this was clearly not the right move. He threw his hands up and yelled, and when I looked around, I realized I was the only car driving down the highway. I pulled over as soon as I could and began to panic. I sat in my car, helpless, and for someone who finds comfort in control, there is nothing more unsettling than realizing you have absolutely none. All I could think about was the oven being on as I waited and watched the procession of flashing red and blue lights pass me by. When I arrived home over 2 hours later, I was extremely frustrated with myself. Although this was not at all an ideal situation, I had to come to terms with what happened and move on. There was nothing I could do about the time that had passed, so I pushed forward. That night, I had to do something that felt so difficult in the moment, but was so worth it. I asked for help. My amazing mom stayed up with me, helping package everything and make up for lost time. We worked side by side and finished twice as fast as I could have alone. That night was the moment I realized that strength does not mean doing everything by yourself. As I drove to the market the next morning to set up my tent, decorations, and display all of my baked goods, I was blessed to feel a sense of peace and pride in what I was about to do. As customers approached my booth and I began talking with fellow vendors, something clicked. I had done it. I sold out with an hour and a half of the market left to go. Yes, I wish I had baked more. Yes, I realized that I still had so much to learn. But rather than feeling overwhelmed, I felt excited for the future, as I had already accomplished something I never would have thought possible. Although to an outsider, it may seem like this project consisted of a fun time baking cookies, brownies, and pumpkin loaves. It was so much more than that. It was resilience when everything felt like it was falling apart. It was humility when I needed it most. And it was courage I wasn't even sure I had in me. The best part is, I'm not done. This is just the beginning. I am now more independent and confident in my ability to interact with other people. And this project didn't just teach me how to run a business, it taught me how to adapt when life doesn't follow the recipe. I have a story and a product that I am proud to speak about. and what an amazing opportunity to share. Speaking of sharing, I provided the cookie tray that is included with the refreshments. I'll also have baked goods and business cards available after presentations conclude. If you'd like a cookie, a card, or maybe some advice on starting a small business, I'd love to talk with you there. Thank you.
One step at a time. There's a certain feeling you get when you're deep in the backcountry, surrounded by trees, quiet, and the sound of your own footsteps. I've always loved exploring, and that sense of being just a little bit lost. It's freeing. It makes you feel small in the best way. But the truth is, we don't really experience these moments without technology. While it's nice to feel lost, what makes these moments truly enjoyable instead of dangerous is knowing that when needed, we can get out. Knowing we have a phone, a flashlight, or a GPS to use when we need it. We don't go into the woods to be lost. We go to explore safely. And that safety is made possible by engineers. When I first told myself I wanted to pursue a career in engineering, I realized I hadn't actually proven to myself that I was capable of doing it. Instead of letting the fear of failure or the unknown hold me back, I decided I needed to challenge myself. I asked, how can I start learning engineering in a space that I'm already passionate about? That question became the foundation for my Capstone project. Using the engineering design process, I began by asking how I could generate power while moving through nature. With the help of my advisor, Dr. Lucas, I developed a solution based on biomechanical energy, using human motion as a power source. My idea was to design shoes that capture the mechanical pressure from footsteps, convert that pressure into a voltage, convert that signal into usable electricity, and store it to charge a battery. This concept connected back to something I learned during 8th grade. During my STEM fair project, studying how magnets affected guitar signals, I was first introduced to transducers, devices that convert one form of energy into another. In that case, the vibrations from the guitar strings were being converted into electrical sound signals. When it became time for me to start working on my Capstone project, Dr. Lucas reintroduced this concept to me, and I realized how I could apply it to my design. My design is built on piezoelectric transducers, devices that generate a voltage when pressure is applied. As you can see on the slide, the diagram on the left shows a standard electrical schematic of a piezoelectric transducer. Piezoelectric transducers generate a voltage when they are compressed and released. However, this voltage comes out as alternating current, or AC. Most devices, including electronics that charge batteries, require direct current, or DC. To solve this, I had to convert this AC current into DC. To do this, I designed and built a circuit called a bridge rectifier, which converts that signal into AC. As you can see on the slide, the diagram on the left shows the standard electrical schematic of a full-wave bridge rectifier. The circuit uses 4 diodes arranged in a diamond shape so that the electricity produced from each footstep can only flow in one direction. Even after this conversion, however, the electricity produced from each footstep comes in very short bursts. To solve this, I added a capacitor, which acts like a temporary storage container, collecting those small pulses and smoothing them into a steadier output. From there, I incorporated a DC boost converter to increase the voltage to a stable 5 volts, which is the standard required for USB charging. Once that voltage was consistent, I was able to add my portable battery pack to the output of my DC boost converter to allow the small amounts of energy generated with each of my footsteps to slowly accumulate and be stored in the battery pack. During the create phase, I had to build the physical structure that would house these electrical components. I 3D printed custom shoe soles to house this piezo array. Designing the sole was important because it not only had to protect these electrical components, but it also had to allow for enough flexibility for the piezo elements to activate when I walked. To do this, I used thermoplastic polyurethane, or TPU filament, instead of the standard rigid 3D printing material. TPU is flexible and resilient, which allowed the sole to bend slightly with each step. This filament not only improved comfort, but allowed the piezo elements the pressure to transfer more effectively to the piezo elements. From here, I soldered each of the elements together in a parallel, which increases the voltage produced with each step. After that, I coated each of the elements in hot glue to provide insulation and protect the elements from repeated stress from my movement and walking. When combined, the rectifier, capacitor, boost converter, and battery system, these components create a complete energy harvesting system that captures the mechanical pressure from my footsteps, converts that pressure into usable electricity, and stores it for later use, like charging my phone or flashlight. Now, for the question that everyone asks, do my shoes actually work? Well, I want to show you a video that was filmed just a few weeks ago of me charging my phone with my shoes. It was this moment that I gained the feeling that I realized could drive me through a career in engineering. It made me realize that this project taught me something important. While the device I built captures energy from footsteps, the process of building it gave me something far more valuable. It gave me the confidence and the opportunity to prove to myself that I could think like an engineer. Engineering, much like hiking, is a journey made one step at a time. Each question, each challenge, and each improvement moves you a little further down the trail. This project was my first real step into engineering, and it's a step I'm excited to keep building on in the future, continuing to blaze my own trail one step at a time. Thank you.
Through here is a popsicle stick bridge, middle of high school. You know, we can only use popsicle sticks and glue to hold the bridge together, and the goal is to hold as much weight as possible. Well, during this, you probably use the engineering design process. The engineering design process is classified as running into a problem, thinking about different solutions, creating the best solution, testing, and improving it. I learned about this in my middle school STEM class. Another thing I gained from that class was a love for engineering. I thought it was so cool when popsicle sticks, if arranged in a certain way, could hold over 200 plus pounds. Or just to get creativity in engineering. I learned one of the pieces of media that I follow is a YouTube channel called the Hacksmith Industries. And on this channel, they bring things from fictional stories into real life using engineering. One of my favorite projects that they've done is create a lightsaber. Now, it started off as a long metal tube that ran electricity through to get the glow red hot. But over the years, they've refined it into an actual beam of fire or plasma.
So I thought this was so cool. That's the scope of engineering, like the vastness of it. So when Capstone came around, I knew what I wanted to do, something cool, like a lightsaber. So I thought about it for a little bit and came up with an idea. I wanted to build and design a robot. I had a few ideas for the robot. At first, I wanted to make a stair-climbing robot. I learned that my first step to do this was to get the measurements from school and at home so I can build a prototype for it. And I made a prototype out of cardboard because it was easy to work with and I could change the wheel sizes and placement. But shortly after I did this, I ran into a problem. I realized that this project would be too easy. There wouldn't be enough to it. It would just be 3D printing parts and assembling them. So, with Dr. Lucas's help, I decided to shift my Capstone project to creating the Arduino-powered micro-quadruped robot. What all that means is that it's a 4-legged walking robot with 3 servos per leg, and they all have to work together in sync for the robot to walk. So the first step for this was to 3D print the parts and assemble them, which was pretty straightforward because I already had the designs based off a line. Next thing I needed to do was the coding. Now, I had no idea how to code, really. The only coding I'd ever done was block coding. It looked like this. It's a simple drag-and-drop coding method to where all the pieces fit together like a puzzle to create software. However, Arduino used a different type of coding. They used a dialect of C++ to where you actually have to write everything out, and it's a lot more complicated and took a lot of iterations and tries to finally get right. And during this, I realized my first problem. See, one of the servos of my robot had not responded to any of the code that I wrote, and I had no idea why. So I went back to the engineer design process, and my first idea was to just replace the servo, because maybe it was a bad servo or it broke. I did that, but the problem persisted. So The next step was to look over the code and see if maybe there was a problem there. And I found it. All I needed to do was delete one simple line of code, and the project, everything worked how I wanted it. The next thing I needed to do was build feet for the robot because I noticed that the grip of the robot was not good. It would move, but it would not go anywhere. It would just stay in one place. So with Dr. Lucas' help again, I decided to build feet for the robot out of a rubber-like filament set up with grip. Everything came together to create this video. Throughout this whole project, I used the engineering design process to, whenever I ran into a problem, I had to think about different solutions to try and fix the problem, primarily with the code because there's a lot of back and forth. And even now, I admit that the code still can be improved upon, but I have achieved my goal of making a robot walk. Throughout this whole project, I learned the importance of iteration, problem solving, and mentorship in engineering. I learned that making mistakes is often just opportunities to learn and improve. Thank you.
I love fixing things in my garage. I grew up around my dad's shop, shadowing him wherever he went, trying to learn everything that he did. And whenever I didn't quite understand, he'd be able to explain it to me in a different way. I was fortunate enough to develop my hands-on skills at a young age from being surrounded by all this fixing and breaking. Whether it was building off something from scratch or building off something I already knew, once my hands touched it, I just kind of understood. When I was approached with the idea to modify the Green Power car, I was more than ecstatic. In the 2025 season, the Green Power team was a part of the stock division. This year, we were fortunate enough to be a part of the modified division, which let us change almost everything about the car except for the body itself. I went into this project thinking it was just going to be as easy as all my other projects. I figured out very quickly I knew nothing about this car. I was starting from scratch. So with the help from people that were on the team last year and prior research to upgrades that I think should be made, I was prepared for our first meeting. As we had our meetings, our first race arrived. This was my first race, so I just wanted to keep an open mind. It went surprisingly well and nothing broke, so at the end of the day, I considered this a win, even though we did come in 13th place. As we got back, we had 70 days till we went back to the same track and raced again. This time, although, we didn't have as much luck. In the first heat, we had major problems with the axle and chain, leading us to spend 50 of the 90 minutes in the pits trying to fix it. So heading into heat 2, we didn't have very high expectations. Our only goal was to get more data. But when I got back to the pit, I was hit with the best news of my life. We were side by side with the national championship winners. Every corner they took, we took right with them. Every second they gained, we gained it back. And we even started to gain some seconds on them. All until the 62-minute mark. Our lap time started to plummet. Our race positions started to drop. First, then second, then third. And next thing I knew it, we were in dead last. All because our batteries had died. While I've completed my original goal of upgrading the car with the speed controller and other upgrades, I've taken on a new challenge. That being getting our amperage pull down from the 30 plus that we have now down to under 20 so that we can run a full 90-minute race at Talladega and win the national championship. This is a lot easier said than done. And after everything I've learned so far, I definitely won't underestimate it. Let me explain it to you in a different way. Imagine your younger self on a bike, and you're going up this steep hill. You put the bike into the lowest gear, and you go to pedal. You start pedaling and pedaling and pedaling, and the pedals just keep going faster until you're out of breath. Your heart is racing, and you're just burnt out. You look down, and you have gone nowhere. You take a breath, and you try again. You get back on your bike, and you put it on the highest gear. You go to pedal and you realize very quickly it's much harder to accelerate this bike. After a while, you're burnt out again. This time, not because of your heart rate, but because your legs have just lost all their power. The bike and the car are very similar in these ways. I could gear the car really low, and the car would have a much lower max speed and demanding too much torque during acceleration, causing massive strain on the motor. Or I could gear the car really high, and the car would have a much higher max speed, but such a low acceleration that we would never be actually able to achieve those speeds. So much like the bike, I have to find the perfect gear ratio so that the car doesn't have too low of a max speed and demanding too much current pushed through the motor, and so that the car doesn't have too high of a max speed and just never being able to achieve that speed. See, the goal isn't to just find the gear ratio that lets us run the fastest laps or get off the line the fastest, but to find the perfect gear ratio so that the motor operates in its most efficient range during race speeds without demanding too much torque during acceleration. Throughout the process of developing my hands-on skills and knowledge, other traits have grown alongside it. Up until now, I didn't know why I've been so drawn to machines, but I know why now. Engines don't need conversations. They don't ask you how you are. They don't ask you how your day is. They just need you to listen to them. And that's what I was comfortable with. This project and role as team lead has taught me that it is much more than that. The information can't just stay in my head anymore. I had to create a legacy. I had to first learn all of the mechanical aspects and then learn them all to the point to where I could teach it to someone that has no idea what I'm talking about. This project became both an external and internal learning experience, forcing me out of my quietness and enabling me to teach the younger team members what I know so that they can be successful for when I'm gone. Thank you.
Growing up, I was always fascinated with medicine due to my parents' stories of the ER. My mom is a board-certified emergency medicine physician, and my dad is a registered nurse working on becoming a nurse practitioner with over 25 years of experience. Hearing all the crazy ailments and treatments really sparked something in me. I knew I wanted my capstone to be about biology and research, but I struggled to find a definitive topic. I initially wanted to do a growth experiment of pearl oyster mushrooms given different wood substrates. But that didn't work, because do you know how hard it is to grow mushrooms? You have to control many different variables: light, temperature, humidity. But I'm glad that it didn't work, because then I took microbiology. And in microbiology, we had a lab that involved fermenting and eating our own foods. Needless to say, I was enthralled. So while learning about bacteria and their significance, I learned about fermentation in the gut and the abundant biodiversity of the gut flora. I knew I would never tire talking about it, and I wanted to learn more. Now, growing up, I struggled to pay attention, often daydreaming or zoning out during class, to the point where teachers noticed, and I became increasingly less confident and anxious. This would manifest itself in many different ways. Sometimes I wouldn't turn in my work because I was worried that it wouldn't be good enough or perfect. I recently got diagnosed with ADHD. Part of the reason why it took so long is because ADHD is often underdiagnosed in girls and women. But I had lived my whole life with undiagnosed ADHD, so I had to learn to find my new normal. That's where my mushroom project came in. While I was struggling to get supplies from suppliers and determine growing conditions, the project slowly changed as I learned what I would really have to do for it to work. All of this was piled on top of college applications and a very intensive ACT prep course. Things were falling through the cracks. So in December, over break, I scrapped the mushroom project. And my back was up against the wall, so I had to pivot. So one night during dinner, while I was talking with my parents, gut research came up. And we came up with the idea of doing an overview paper on current gut research and its implications. So I immediately got to work. I read through and annotated graduate-level research papers and studies. Now, as a little disclaimer, I am not a medical professional, but I learned a lot on the importance of the gut in early brain development. Now, when I was younger, I was on repeated antibiotics for ear infections, and preliminary studies have shown that when your gut is disrupted, it can result in a lack of neurotransmitters, such as serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and this can lead to disorders such as ADHD. It's kind of crazy that my whole project revolves around ADHD. When your gut is disrupted or in dysbiosis, it can lead to an immune response of too many cytokines or inflammatory proteins. This leads to increased permeability of the blood-brain barrier, which then leads to an increased risk of inflammation and infection. Research suggests possible clinical uses of fermented foods, such as kimchi, yogurt, sauerkraut, and kefir, as well as probiotics and prebiotics. Probiotics being the bacteria themselves, and prebiotics being the fiber and other nutrients they need. Now it's time for a gut check. Where am I on this project? Well, my paper is almost done, and in the fourth quarter, I plan to do a teaching workshop that will allow students to learn how to keep their gut healthy. This teaching workshop will have a fermentation bar that will show many different fermented foods. I plan to allow students to engage in a taste test, attributing each bacterium to unique taste. Some examples of the food that I will have will be yogurt with lactobacillus strains, as well as Swiss cheese with Propionibacterium. Capstone taught me resilience, to ask for help when I need it, to not be afraid of showing my work even when it's not perfect. These are incredibly huge life lessons, and I will continue to use them into college. I'm proud to have learned how to manage my ADHD and not let it prevent me from doing what I want and accomplishing my goals. Thank you.
I want you to take a moment to pause and read this quote. I have lived a lot of places in my 18 years. When my family moved to Blount County, we were seeking healthier waters. I started at CBA in 7th grade, right in the middle of those awkward and uncertain years. Every Wednesday, my mom had teacher meetings on campus, and I had 3 hours to waste. So I walked down the greenway, past the buildings, and a little deeper into the woods each time. Henry David Thoreau did the same. Restless, he was searching for something he couldn't name. He moved into a cabin off the edge of Walden Pond. He wanted to strip life down to what mattered most and find out what it truly meant to be alive. Eventually, I found my own Walden, this spot by Pistol Creek. For the first time in my life, I wasn't restless or searching for the next distraction. The river settled my mind and gave me a peace I had never found before. Thoreau called it living deep, and sitting there for the first time, I understood what that meant. So naturally, when it came time for senior capstone, I knew I wanted to share this feeling with anyone who was willing to feel it themselves. At first, the water cleared my thoughts. Then it filled them with questions about watersheds, runoff, invasive species, and how something so powerful could also be so fragile. My first idea was a snorkeling club, a way to get kids in the water beneath the surface and quite literally stick their faces in it. I applied for a grant to get all my needed supplies and received it. Then things shifted. The Pistol Creek dam removal was very exciting news despite my own hopes for Capstone. Dams fragment river systems, blocking fish migration, trapping sediment, and turning cold moving water into something slow and stagnant. Removing a dam doesn't just open the channel, it restores the entire ecosystem. But restoration is messy before it's beautiful. That years of built-up sediment flush downstream. Water levels drop and visibility changes. I didn't want to put a kid in a snorkel mask in that. So the club stalled, and I had to decide whether to adapt, change my plan completely, or find a different way in. So I stopped trying to manufacture impact, and instead I created a space for it. This is how my outdoor classroom, Common Grounds, was born. The first thing I had to do was scope out a perfect location that was accessible for Greenway users, lower school, and upper school students and staff. Once I had found that location, right about here, I had to get permission from 3 separate parties of people. First, the city of Alcoa, who technically owns the property, then CBA administration, and finally Clayton Homes so that they could mow down the area for me to get started. Then I had to find funding, which we all know can be very difficult. This means someone had to truly believe and support in my vision. And I would love to thank Julie Conkle for being that person. I truly could not have made this happen without her, as she was the main sponsor of my project. After this, I drew up many ideas and designed layouts before finalizing it to represent CBA at the core. A Harkness-style classroom. In true Harkness fashion, there's a large oval or round table where students and teachers face each other with no one positioned at the head, setting up as equals. Instead of listening to a teacher lecture, students lead their own discussions, and this gives them a sense of ownership over their own learning. Well, I wanted Common Grounds to feel the same. Post-planning, the physical labor started, and it was time to put all of my hard work into one special place. My dad and I took countless trips to Home Depot, Walmart, Home Depot, arborists, plant nurseries, Home Depot, and Home Depot. But after a lot of dedication, hard work, and community later, there is an outdoor classroom sitting in that space by the school today. This includes a rock garden with kind and encouraging messages to spread positivity to anyone who walks through or by my classroom, a natural seating with a fire pit to encourage meaningful conversations and those Harkness discussions, native plants hand-chosen by myself to better the environment around the classroom, and stepping stones in direct correlation to those plants. The last element of this classroom that I want to talk about is my educational sign. Unfortunately, it is not in place today, but that is only because I did not want to sacrifice the quality of this sign over the time I had left. But it is on the way, and it will go over things like riparian zones, invasives versus non-invasive species, and habitat value. Something that I have especially enjoyed during this project is meeting the amazing community members of Blount County. This kindness I have been so blessed to receive really cements the significance of this place that I have called home for the past 6 years. But time doesn't stop, and eventually I will head to college in a brand new state. My legacy is giving back to CBA the valuable principles that they have instilled in me. Accepting change and accepting what nature has to give to each and every one of us. But even Thoreau left Walden Pond, not because he had failed, but because he had learned what he came to learn. And healthy systems aren't stagnant, they flow. Pistol Creek flows into the Little River flows into the Tennessee River. These small streams become something larger by continuing to move. Common Grounds works the same way. One stop, one conversation, one class discussion outside rather than inside. One quiet student sitting still for 30 minutes on a Wednesday afternoon. Small moments flow into bigger change. For years of my life, I was searching for my own type of stasis. Ironically, I found a home beside something that never stands still. Thank you.
Money. It's something everyone wants, desires, chases. It's something far fewer understand. It only takes one mistake when you're young to throw it all away. I got my first real job around 14. The thrill of a paycheck and, by extension, the freedom of having earned money overwhelmed any sense of rationality, and I found myself spending every dollar I raked in on the usual things. Video games, DoorDash, and any random something I just had to have because everyone else had one. As I got older, with an increasing number of responsibilities, it became clear quickly how vital it was to keep track of what I was throwing my money at. I found myself with a newfound desire to maximize how long each cent lasted. In 8th grade, Mr. DeMarcus gave us a small taste of the stock market and the handling of money through a $10,000 stock challenge assigned to us towards the end of the year. Rather than feeling overwhelmed by the vast amount of information the stock market held, I became wrapped in the way the markets fluctuated and influenced each other. As excited as I was at this time, Mr. DeMarcus' class wouldn't become truly relevant until much later. During my junior year, I had an internship at DeRoyal Industries. At the time, my leading career plan was to become a biomedical engineer. Though I loved the internship, I came to realize that I didn't necessarily want that career. I had fun working with the engineers on different devices, but what I found more interesting was actually the sales of their products. By the time the internship concluded, I was more confused than ever as to what I wanted to do with my life. And like any broke teenager, I followed the money. This ultimately led me into a second, new internship with Ameriprise Financial, where the start of my capstone was born. Sitting in on real client meetings and working closely with financial advisors to learn the nuances of budgeting, investing, and planning became the catalyst for my initial capstone proposal, where I planned to make real financial plans using the software Ameriprise had to offer for simulated clients as well as real ones of my own. Throughout the internship, spanning the past year and a half, I developed the skills and knowledge necessary to create these plans, and by the time Halloween rolled around, I had completed them. This, however, was where my idea of capstone began to fall apart. I started to grapple with serious doubts over the scope of my project. I found myself constantly comparing my work to that of years prior, as well as that of my peers, and came to the conclusion that my work was ultimately inadequate, given the depth of those around me. In my quest to reach this unquantifiable bar, I came to the realization that everything that I had learned up to this moment was for the sake of helping others. Each carefully crafted plan was designed to benefit the life of another individual. I felt that as someone who now wanted to go into this field, my capstone ought to reflect that attitude. Thus sprouted my capstone 2.0. If I boiled down my internship into its most crucial lessons and mold them into one coherent booklet, I'd surely be able to help people take control of their finances, just like Ameriprise did for me. This idea, while ambitious, came with its own set of new challenges. The most prominent roadblock I faced when crafting my booklet was its actual contents. Without a proper CFP, or Certified Financial Planner, license, I could only go as far as general advice. This severely hindered my progress, and I became stuck once again. I continued putting it off, and by now, it was mid-November. Admittedly, senior year got the better of me between college applications, extracurriculars, and the illusion that I had all the time in the world. I allowed capstone to fall to the wayside in favor of whatever I deemed more important at that moment. On the rare occasion I did sit down to attempt writing something, I felt overshadowed by the idea that whatever I wrote would be too simplistic, too basic, too plain to be considered a true capstone project. What was I but another quarter in the bucket of change? That was, until a dinner-time conversation with my younger siblings. As I ranted about the status of my project and my own insufficiency, my youngest sister noted that she had no idea what I was talking about. It was at this moment that I realized that what seemed like the raw basics to me, the oversimplified ideas that any knucklehead in the realm of finance could figure out, was still unknown and unfound information to her who had never once stepped foot into the world of finance. I began to rewrite my project to capture just that, turning my booklet into what is now a teenager's guide to financial freedom. With this new label, I can target those in 8th or 9th grade who have yet to see this material but are soon to find themselves with their first jobs, and I can help them to avoid the mistakes I made at their age. Inside my booklet, you will find foundational information covering investing, market traps, and credit, a first-time introduction for those unfamiliar with the content in its material. It was through this experience that I realized that expecting myself to produce an original work without the education, certification, or occupation was trivial. I shifted my focus instead to the small differences I can make now and how they can play a much larger role in my future. I started with the impact I can make here at CBA. Circling back to my youth, I returned to Mr. DeMarcus with a proposition, and he graciously gave me the opportunity to go in and teach his 8th grade students a lesson, allowing me to see my work in action for the first time. The students were engaged, they asked thoughtful questions, and I felt a sense of pride when witnessing the look on their faces when giving a demonstration of my lesson in action. I was extremely happy to hear them talking about the lesson even after the class was over. I enjoyed it so much that now I can't imagine letting it end there, because what good are my efforts if they never leave this campus? If I want to make a difference, I need to grow beyond the boundaries of my own school and branch out into the community. I began reaching out to see if there was such an opportunity, and am happy to say that I will be taking all that I have learned to a freshman classroom at William Blount High School this spring. And I won't stop there. What I have now is just the beginning, a draft, a down payment, if you will, something I will carry with me throughout my career to expand, revise, republish, and ultimately serve as the culminary product of a lifetime of learning. Thank you.
Growing up, I lived on a lake, and most of my earlier life was just spent playing around in the water. My parents tried to sign me up for sports like soccer and karate, but none of them really piqued my interest that much. That's when they thought to maybe sign me up for a summer league swim team. Since I'd spent so much time in the water in my earlier life, it became my safe space. So being able to compete in a sport and be in my safe space at the same time was perfect for me. When we were presented with our CBA Capstone project, I immediately thought back to my safe space, the water. And that's what made me think about creating a CBA middle school swim team. We already had a CBA high school swim team in partnership with the Alcoa team, so I thought, why not make a CBA middle school team in partnership with Alcoa's? That's when I reached out to the coaches to find out they actually didn't have a middle school team yet, but they were planning to make one at the same time I was wanting to. So it worked out perfectly. After talking to the coaches, I started reaching out to our school through email and newsletter to see if I could find any interest. I didn't go in super hopeful because our school is pretty small, and there's only like a handful of swimmers I actually knew of. But to my surprise, I actually got a little bit of interest back, which was wonderful. After I'd gotten interest, I had to start working towards being a coach. And that included online certifications like lifeguard, CPR, and other like concussion. And that's when I encountered one of my first few of the roadblocks. To get the online certifications, you had to be 17 and a half, but I was only 17 and a quarter at the time. It ended up being okay because I just waited a few months until I was finally 17 and a half for whatever reason, and then got the certifications figured out. Next to my roadblocks was getting to practice. My practices ended right as Alcoa started, so I'd have to jump out of the pool quickly and drive on as quickly as I could to get to Alcoa's practice. And if any of you have the misfortune of driving on Alcoa Highway recently, I'm sure you know all about the roadblocks that I dealt with. Regardless, I was still able to make it to our first practice. It was a little nerve-wracking for me because coaching is definitely not my thing, and I'm not much of a social person. You might think that since I've been swimming for basically my whole life, that coaching would come naturally, but it didn't at all. Taking advice was so much different than giving it, and I learned that very quickly. Some of these swimmers were brand new to the sport, so they just didn't understand like swimmer lingo that I've picked up on from swimming for so long. So I thought back to my roots and how I'm much more of a visual learner. So I thought, why not teach them that way? Many of the practices, I would get into the water with athletes and show them the techniques and strokes I wanted them to learn. And immediately it clicked with them. They mentally and physically improved in the water so much, and I felt so rewarded. It was a type of accomplishment I'd never really experienced before because I hadn't tried being a coach. Before I knew it, it was time for our first dual meet. If you don't know what a dual meet is, it's basically a competition between 1 to 3 separate schools where you have swimmers competing in events trying to win and score the most points for their team. I was a little worried for one swimmer in specific at our first meet because he was swimming the 50-yard freestyle. And in practice, he wasn't ever able to complete a full 50 without stopping at the 25-yard mark, which would get him disqualified in a race. But my worries were completely gone when he dove in and just absolutely crushed the race. He even beat some swimmers even though it was his first time racing ever. I, of course, picked on him a little bit for maybe not trying hard enough in practice, but still, regardless, I was so proud of him. Dual meet after dual meet, we were putting up some crazy impressive numbers against teams that were even like triple our size, showing the quality of our swimmers over the quantity of theirs. School season moves very quickly, and before I knew it, it was time for our first big meet, the Ray Buzzard swim meet. Ray Buzzard takes place at the Allen Jones Aquatic Center, which is the same facility that the UTK swim and dive team uses. It's top of the line, and people come all around the country just to swim here. I was excited to see what our swimmers could do since this was the first time they were racing in a pool this nice. And my excitement was justified when every swimmer just absolutely crushed it. That same swimmer I talked about who swam the 50 freestyle at the last dual meet dropped about 3 seconds in his 50. And if any of you do any kind of racing sports, 50 yards, 3 seconds, I'm sure you know that's a huge deal. And it wasn't just him. Almost every swimmer dropped a crazy amount of time in every event they swam. I was so proud of them, and they were proud of themselves too. Sadly, things were just going too well for us. And our final meet, the city meet after Ray Buzzard, got canceled indefinitely because of snow. Regardless, it was a little upsetting, but in the end it was okay because I was proud of the swimmers and what they accomplished, and they were happy with what they did too. Overall, this was a very unique experience for me because I had so many more responsibilities than I normally would during a school season. Instead of just worrying about my own races, I had to worry about the middle schoolers. I had to make sure they made it to their races on time, made sure I gave them feedback, and made sure to cheer them on, of course. There were countless times where I would just be rushing up to the blocks last second to get to my event because I was just too distracted cheering on the middle schoolers. Overall, I'm so thankful for how hard the swimmers worked this season, and I can't imagine doing this without the coaches' help at Alcoa. I hope once I'm in college and I come back on my breaks that I can see how much the program's progressed and how much the swimmers have as well. Thank you.
In this room right now are 10 or more special people who will become Green Power Race sponsors. I'm excited to tell you about this opportunity, but first I want to tell you about how my Capstone project taught me skills most are afraid to learn. Calling your friend, let alone a stranger, is unpleasant for most people, including me. So when I was tasked with funding our school's Green Power team, this is the exact challenge I started with. I did have some previous experience during the formation of the club for the 2024-2025 season. Last year, with no experience in fundraising, I challenged myself to handle the club's finances. I chose fundraising as it personally challenged me to go outside my comfort zone while also teaching me critical business skills. I am by no means a salesman, far from it, but I understood the importance of the role, as without it, there is no car or club. Fast forward to the beginning of senior year, and I was once again tasked with funding the club's activities. Green Power is a program originally started in the UK and introduced to the US in 2014. Green Power combines engineering and business to challenge students on a variety of problems. Some of the main focuses are friction reduction, energy efficiency, and speed. Our program here at CBA specifically attracts a variety of students, including those interested in social media marketing, telemetry, electronics, photography, and most importantly, fundraising. To fund all these components of Green Power would require a whopping $10,000, which for me as a high school senior is a lot of money. In addition to this, I would also need to make a budget that would factor in the purchasing of new car parts, travel, and lodging experience. On top of this, my mentor and team coach, Dr. Lucas, gave me an additional challenge. As the team changes yearly, I was entrusted with creating a sustainable budget and forming long-lasting connections that would be there after I leave. I first began cold calling. My first cold call ended before it had even begun. I'd barely finished introducing myself, let alone the club, before the caller told me they wanted nothing to do with me. From this, I learned that cold calling is waiting for one yes in a sea of rejection. And learning to cold call is accepting rejection, because eventually the right person will be found and the right audience will be met. I'm confident there are people in this room that are that someone. For the process, I scoured the web looking for the best leads. Mechanic shops, engineering firms, any company I could find a phone number for. From this, I learned about the salesman's greatest challenge, the assistants. These administrative assistants who guard the gates of my Capstone success like a dragon to its gold. As July and August passed with little success, I soon learned about the other greatest challenge, getting a response. From managers being out of the office for the next week or two, phone numbers no longer in service, and a pile of automated rejection emails flooding my inbox, people have a wide vocabulary when rejecting sponsorships. Some of my favorite include, our budget does not support any additional sponsors. With how the market's been, I think we'll have to decline. And my favorite of all, we do not care for electric cars. Those are the no's, but I want to talk about the yeses. I had successes, and I want to personally thank those who made not only my capstone, but this program possible. 5,000 from Denzo, 1,200 from C2RL Engineering, 1,000 from Mr. Jerry Sluter, 750 from Blount County Chamber of Commerce, 500 from Mr. Rick Boyd, 500 from Carfix and Maryville, 500 from Denton Financial, 300 from Performance Consultants, Inc., and lastly, 250 from LDA Engineering. These companies and individuals are more than just sponsors. They're supporters of a program to challenge students through STEM, including building, presenting, and racing our car. They also taught me the most valuable aspect of business, understanding your network. When I first started my capstone project, I thought the entire focus would be on the $10,000. It was not. Over the past 4 years, I've made connections with mentors and companies that helped me raise these funds. From contacting previous sponsors, mentors, and companies, I learned the value of understanding your network. I also learned how to stay motivated when facing rejection. When dealing with pitches, you're going to receive a lot of rejection. And figuring out how to deal with that is the most important step. But if you keep looking, eventually you'll find the right audience. So I have a question for you, the audience. Do you support project-based learning? Do you value STEM? Do you think it's critical we give students the ability to hone their skills on certain subjects? If you believe in all these, then why not sponsor our Green Power team? Thank you.
Ensemble means as one. You will hear people say that the performing arts industry is built on the connections that you make. You will also hear people in the same industry talk about how the people they are working with have become like a family. Part of what bonds us so tightly and so quickly is not just the fact that we spend hours upon hours working and perfecting our crafts together, but the fact that our biggest moments are shared, both positive and negative. We have all had our most vulnerable moments in an audition room. We have all gotten a cast list and have screamed or cried tears of joy or disappointment. We have all experienced the pain of getting cut. We have all had first rehearsal jitters, opening night butterflies, and post-show depression. Our performances are built of little bits and pieces of ourselves because we put 100% of ourselves into them, bonding us. That is what my capstone is. An ensemble, sharing one big moment together as one. I have been participating in the arts since I was 2 years old, beginning in ballet in Orlando, Florida. In 2019, I auditioned for the Oak Ridge Civic Ballet Association and was cast in Peter and the Wolf, followed by my first Nutcracker that fall. That was it. I found my niche. I love performing. I worked up the courage to audition for CBA's spring musical, just like the big kids did, to see if it would be just as fun as the ballets I did the previous year. Lo and behold, I was cast as a featured dancer and hot box girl in Guys and Dolls Jr., and it had me hooked. Since then, I've performed in over 24 productions across ballet and theater. I have participated in workshops and masterclasses. I've been nominated for a Tennessee Theater Marquee Award, and I have performed in regional honor choirs. I've also discovered a passion for arts leadership and management through my work at the historic Tennessee Theater, where I currently serve as a student ambassador, a head usher, and a marketing and sales intern. But what has gotten me here at 17 years old is not just training or shows, it's the relationships I've built along the way. My very first day in the Children's Community Theater in November of 2024, I realized how much young, local talent we have in our area. Of course, I knew about our talent here at CBA, but my eyes were open to how much else was out there in our community. These were the artists that inspired my project. I wanted to create a space where artists could perform. I wanted to bring together my two families that raised me, my CBA family and my family in the arts. I started brainstorming. I brainstormed venues, performers, whether or not it should be a fundraiser. I knew one thing. I didn't just want it to be a talent show. I wanted it to reflect what the arts have always meant to me, community. So I started reaching out to people to see who would be interested in performing. The first night, I reached out to 15 different performers, and within hours, I had 10 yeses. This made me realize this was bigger than just my idea. Other people wanted to be part of something too. But wanting to create something and actually producing it are two very different things. First, I knew I needed to secure a venue. After cold calling and visiting 3 different local venues, I landed on Blue Tick Tavern. It had the space I wanted with the most reasonable price at $400 for the night, which is still a reasonably big price for a student project. Luckily, I was able to secure a sponsor to cover the cost of the evening, allowing me to move forward confidently and officially book the space for January 14th. From then, it was time to move on to my graphic design components. I spent countless hours perfecting and designing my dream posters and playbills, complete with elaborate covers, the set list, thank yous, a director's note, and advertisements for upcoming shows that you could come see the performers in. Meanwhile, I was also managing artists, collecting bios and headshots, accompaniment tracks, building a set list that balanced story and energy, creating a group chat for communication and reminders, which I sometimes had to send out multiple times to get what I really needed. I also secured a mic check time and a sound engineer for the night of. I also established the table layout and the buffet for the evening. Everything seemed set and ready to go. And then the setbacks came. About 3 weeks before the performance, I woke up to texts on my phone. Artists were dropping out. For one reason or another, they were suddenly not able to make it. After an extensive breakdown that morning, I took a breath and reached out to more artists. And within hours, I had new confirmations. That day taught me more about leadership than any of the rest of this coordination process. It taught me that leadership isn't just about things going smoothly. It's about how you respond when they don't. Eventually, after the countless phone calls, emails, design drafts, and song titles, the night finally arrived. I stood in Blue Tick Tavern, watching the audience members and the artists file in. The playbills were stacked, the posters were hung, the pizzas were being made, and I felt a sense of pride. I had done it. As I watched the performers and audience members greet each other, encourage each other, fill the room with collective anticipation and excitement, that's when I realized this wasn't just a showcase anymore. It was a community of strangers and friends, of performers and spectators, and it brought me back to a moment about a year earlier. My first day in the Children's Community Theater. My music director, Dr. Ken Hawkins, told us that we were an ensemble. An ensemble means as one. Therefore, we were to act like one, sing like one, blend like one. No single voice overpowering another, no single person more important than the group. At the time, I thought he was just talking about harmonies or choreography, but now I realize he was talking about something much bigger. Being part of an ensemble is not just how you perform together on stage. It's about how you perform off stage. It's about how you connect with others, and it's about how you create space for those around you. That's what this showcase is. This project taught me that I don't just want to be in a community. I want to create them. I want to create spaces where performers can come and feel supported. I want to create moments that bring people together. I want to create places where community isn't accidental, but intentional. That is what my capstone is. A thank you to the families that raised me. By creating one more family, one more stage, one more shared moment. An ensemble means as one, and that is exactly what we are. Thank you.
First, I want to thank all of you for coming this evening and supporting these seniors in their big moment. They have a bigger moment coming up in June, and they'll be thankful for that. I'll say this again, take a breath, like I did Tuesday night. One step done, okay? Now, I will share something with you. You've been supported by the people that spoke Tuesday night, okay? What they're really sitting there thinking is, thank goodness it's not me. I'm done. This has been a culmination of years. I said this Tuesday night, and I will reiterate it because I want you to hear this. This is not something that you've seen tonight. This is not something that just happens like that. It is a culmination of years of practice, from family gatherings, being on stage, from small classroom presentations to individual presentations that they have to do, group work. It's all a culmination of all of those things. And that's what you see tonight. And I know the struggles that some of these young people have been through to get to this point, and none of them have been without some struggle, believe me. But I think what I heard tonight and what I heard Tuesday night was this. You've learned a lot of things about business, facts and figures, how to build, how to talk to people. But I think you've learned more about yourselves than you have anything else. And that's what you will take with you when you leave here. And you have to go out there and do this again in a group of people or maybe just a personal interview. But you'll take this with you, this moment, and you'll hold on to that because you learned from it. Okay? All right. We thank all of you for coming. Let's have another round of applause for all of these wonderful seniors.